In 1925, 3 men walked into the deepest, most isolated reaches of the Amazon rainforest. Before departing, their leader left strict instructions that if they did not return, no one should attempt a rescue. They vanished completely. Despite his warning, their disappearance triggered a massive, century-long search effort. Over the following decades, more than 100 people perished in the jungle attempting to trace the expedition's final footsteps. The man who led that doomed venture was Major Percy Fawcett. A decorated British surveyor, Fawcett had spent nearly 2 decades consumed by a single obsession, locating an ancient, highly developed metropolis he called the Lost City of Z. For decades, history recorded Fawcett as a tragic eccentric who dragged his eldest son to his death chasing a hallucination. But modern science has begun to look at his final journey through a completely different lens. Fawcett's fixation began with a document known as Manuscript 512. Written by Portuguese explorers in the 1700s and housed in the National Library of Brazil, it detailed the discovery of an abandoned city deep in the jungle, complete with stone archways and statues that echoed Greco-Roman architecture. When Fawcett presented his theory that a vast civilization once thrived in the Amazon, the scientific establishment dismissed him. His peers at the Royal Geographical Society treated the idea as a romantic fantasy. The academic consensus in the 1920s viewed the Amazon as a counterfeit paradise. Botanists and anthropologists argued that the region's highly acidic soil and rampant tropical diseases made it ecologically incapable of supporting the large-scale agriculture required to feed an urban population. As years passed, Fawcett's insistence drew escalating mockery. The press and the academic community increasingly painted him as a man unmoored from reality, aggressively fighting against established biological and geographical facts. His 1925 expedition became a desperate, fatal gamble to vindicate his life's work and prove the entire Western scientific establishment wrong. The reality of navigating the Amazon on foot was brutal. Fawcett and his 2 companions endured severe heat, malaria-carrying insects, and crippling starvation as they hacked their way through the dense vegetation of the Mato Grosso. Yet, the deeper he went, the more he noticed anomalies, scattered fragments of ancient pottery found at higher altitudes, and subtle geometric patterns in the earth. Convinced he was on the threshold of discovery, he sent a final, triumphant letter back to his wife before stepping off the map. Nearly a century later, archaeologists returned to the exact regions Fawcett had explored. This time, they completely bypassed the dense undergrowth, choosing instead to survey the jungle from high above using advanced airborne LiDAR technology. LiDAR systems emit millions of laser pulses per second. These lasers slip through gaps in the digital canopy, bombarding the surface to create a 3D topographical map. When researchers strip away the vegetation from this data, the natural topography vanishes. In its place, the scans plot out perfect right angles and circles. The data reveals more than 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms, circular plazas, defensive moats, and a massive interconnected grid of straight roadways spanning hundreds of square miles. These are the unmistakable footprints of a sprawling, heavily populated civilization, one that predates the Maya and rivals them in scale and engineering. If a society of this magnitude thrived in the Amazon, producing thousands of structures and roadways, how did millions of people vanish without leaving a visible trace? The answer lies in the timeline of contact. When the first European explorers arrived on the coasts of South America, they introduced pathogens like smallpox. These diseases decimated the coastal tribes, and the infections quickly transferred to indigenous trading partners, traveling inward along these very road networks to wipe out the deep jungle populations, long before any European actually laid eyes on them. By the time Fawcett arrived, the people were gone, but he also failed to see the ruins because he was looking for the wrong materials. Influenced by discoveries like Machu Picchu, he expected the heavy masonry, stone archways, and gold of the Andean cultures. The Amazonian civilizations practiced something archaeologists now call garden urbanism. In a jungle environment lacking usable stone, they engineered living earth rather than building with rock. They fortified the poor, acidic dirt by mixing it with charcoal and organic waste, creating rich, fertile plots known as terra preta. Their grand structures, palisades, and bridges were constructed entirely out of local timber, vines, and packed soil, perfectly adapted to their environment. Because their entire architectural foundation was organic, it only took a few seasons for the aggressive vegetation to swallow the wood and earth. The metropolis Fawcett sought was never truly buried. As the organic materials decomposed and the canopy closed overhead, the city simply dissolved back into the ecosystem. This leaves a haunting irony surrounding Percy Fawcett's final expedition. Based on his geographic coordinates and journal entries, he almost certainly walked directly over the ancient causeways and handled the pottery of the very civilization he had spent his life trying to find. His eyes were so strictly conditioned by Western definitions of what a city should look like that he failed to realize he was standing directly on top of it. The Amazon basin is a massive, overgrown graveyard. Beneath this vast canopy hides a highly engineered world, a landscape once shaped, moved, and manicured by millions of human hands. Percy Fawcett died a mocked madman chasing a myth, but his blind obsession ultimately led humanity to uncover a truth far more magnificent than a city of gold.